Hello everyone and welcome to Werven's World. Today I would like to do a comparison between Galactic Civilizations 3 and Galactic Civilizations 2, the Ultimate Edition. So Galactic Civilizations 3 just came out and some people were complaining on the forum that it was basically the same as Galactic Civilizations 2 except with fancier graphics. So I thought I would make kind of a comparison between the two games, show what's similar and different so that you can make up your own mind on which game you would like to play. Because of course Galactic Civilizations 2 is much cheaper than 3 is at the moment. So with that, let's get started. So the first thing we'll be looking at is races. The amount of races you can play with was higher in Galactic Civilizations 2. So as you can see here, you would have 12 races to choose from, as well as the ability to create your own custom races, where you can basically assign pros and cons to your race and choose a ship design and all that kind of stuff. In Galactic Civilizations 3, however, you have only access to 8 races that are also very different from each other and are mostly the same ones as from Galactic Civilizations 2, except some missing. So out of the box, Galactic Civilizations 2 Ultimate Edition gives you more races to play with. That said, for me it's not really a big problem because of the modding community. So you have a very, very robust faction designer, and it allows for a lot of freedom in both cases. As you can see here in Galactic Civilizations 3, the abilities to kind of make your own faction is a bit better because you can really add in your own pictures with animations and stuff, and it's actually really, really nice. But in Galactic Civilizations 2, the faction creator is also really nice. So in that sense, the games are not very different from each other, except that out of the box, Galactic Civilization 2 comes with a bit more original races. So on to campaigns. So in the Ultimate Edition of Galactic Civilizations 2, you get 3 different campaigns with each a lot of missions in there. So there's a lot to do. Of course, this all became bigger because of expansions, but that's the current state of the game now. They have a lot of missions. In Galactic Civilizations 3, however, you only have access to one campaign, which has 3 missions, and you have access to a tutorial. So if you're a campaign person, you're going to find more and more hours of gameplay in Galactic Civilizations 2. One of the first thing you'll notice when you start playing these two games is that Galactic Civilizations 2 uses squares for the grid, while 3 uses hexagons for the grid, which makes the map of 3 look a bit more interesting. Furthermore, 3 adds things like dust clouds and nebula to it that give you different effects on your ships if you're passing through them, as well as, for example, black holes that you can't pass through at all. They're kind of like an obstacle on the map. So in that sense, the map is a little bit interesting, a little bit more interesting in Galactic Civilizations 3. The Galactic Civilizations series is known for its customizability, and 2 definitely doesn't disappoint in that respect. Like, you can really build your own ships and you get a fair amount of freedom doing that. Of course, it's a bit of an older engine and the graphics look less impressive, but in general, like, you have a lot of freedom designing your ships. That said, the ship designer of Galactic Civilizations 3 is definitely improved. Like, you got a lot of fun parts to play with, and you do have more options regarding grouping and mirroring of items and rotating, which you could also do in Galactic Civilization 2, but it was all a bit harder to get to work normally. It just works, to me, it works nicer in Galactic Civilizations 3. So in that sense, as you can see here, it is just a small ship I put together in a couple of minutes. It's a mixture of parts of several races. There's some rotating stuff in there. There's some oscillating stuff in there. It really shows how much you can do in a short amount of time. Regarding shipbuilding, I think Galactic Civilizations 3 definitely is better than 2, even though 2 definitely also doesn't disappoint. Furthermore, in Galactic Civilizations 3, you have more of an effect of your shipbuilding. Like in 2, you could basically add different kind of weapons and shields to counter whatever strategy your opponent was using. But here you can also sign up your ships for different roles. They can be escorts or capital ships or that kind of stuff. And that decides how they behave in battle and which targets they will try to kill first. So there's a bit more tactics into the shipbuilding, which to me makes it more fun. Lastly, with the shipbuilding, Galactic Civilizations 3 also added carrier modules, which basically means you can make carriers, which are ships that house little ships like interceptors and stuff that they can launch, and they help you in battle. So that's another part you can play with, and it really has a big effect on battles, and that wasn't in Galactic Civilizations 2. Let's go a bit more into detail of the gameplay. So in Galactic Civilizations 2, you had this thing called alignment. Alignment was basically chosen based on your actions. And at some point when you research a technology, you could choose which alignment you wanted, either good, neutral, and evil. The one that aligned most with your actions was for free, and the other ones you would have to pay for. After your alignment was set, you get some different bonuses depending on whether you chose good, neutral, or evil. Galactic Civilizations 3 mixes this up. They don't have the alignment system, but they've got the ideology system. Basically, every time you colonize a planet or do some other things, you get choices. And these choices, they give you ideology points, either for benevolent, pragmatic, or malevolent. And these points you can put into different kind of upgrades. And well, they're very, very different from each other. For example, you might get a military ship when you choose benevolent, or you might get, for example, some free constructor ships when you choose pragmatic, and so on. The more points you choose to put into the same ideology, basically, well, the stronger those things get. At some point, for example, nobody is allowed to declare war on you unless they also want to declare war on other people. I think that's if you're benevolent. So it really adds some depth to the game, and I kind of like it. They really differ into how you play the game. So to stay a bit with politics, in both games you have the United Planets, which is basically every race coming together once in a while and voting on a certain rule to be passed into the game. For example, as you can see here, the Drangin are the most rich, and you can vote whether they have to pay a little bit to everyone each turn. Basically, the same happens in Galactic Civilizations 3, where you can also vote on things. However, first you basically have to choose a leader of this United Planets. Because in Galactic Civilizations 2, all the things you had to vote for were randomly chosen. While in Galactic Civilizations 3, the leader of the United Planets can basically choose what to vote on. So it adds a slightly different dynamic on top of it. But in both cases, you have access to the United Planets, and you can vote on things that completely change the game. One thing that's missing in Galactic Civilizations 3 is some deeper elements of politics. For example, when you created a race, you could make a political party, and this would give you a certain bonus as long as your political party had the majority in the Senate. Furthermore, you had different government types, and those had a big effect on what you could do. So if you had, for example, a dictatorship, you wouldn't really get any bonuses, but at least you could decide whenever you wanted to go to war, for example, so you would always have the majority in voting. However, if you have one of the higher types of government, you get a lot of, for example, research bonuses or economic bonuses and whatever. Yeah, if you want to go to war, for example, then you have to vote, and if people vote against it, then you can't go to war, which added a lot of fun and depth to the game. And this is something that's definitely missing from Galactic Civilizations 3 at the moment. Another thing that's missing from Galactic Civilizations 3 is espionage. So you could actually use a part of your economy in order to train spies, and you could send these spies to different kind of races, and these spies would be trying to figure out what those races were doing. So at some point when you had enough knowledge, you really could basically ask for a report on that race, and you would know how many ships they had, where those ships were, what they've researched, all that kind of stuff, if they're trading with someone. Furthermore, once you had enough spies, you would get a bit of a research bonus because they kind of were stealing the research of the other races. So that added a nice trade-off because the spies were not cheap, so you had to spend a lot of money in training them, but they also gave you some advantages. So Galactic Civilizations 3 doesn't have it yet. They plan to implement it, but at the moment it doesn't have it yet. Enough about politics, and now on to research. Research is not that different between the two games. Basically, they all have a humongous tech tree. I thought it was a bit too hard to navigate in Galactic Civilizations 2 because, well, it's just everything is packed together, while in 3 they kind of divided it up into 4 trees. That said, in 3 for some reason they're missing a zoom function, so it's also really not very easy to use. Luckily, both games suggest you the research things that you can actually research so that you don't have to look at the tree. Galactic Civilizations 3 spices research up a little bit by sometimes offering you a choice between 3 choices, and you can only research one of those. You could trade for the other two options with other races if they research those, but otherwise you're basically stuck with the choice you made. So it spices it up a little, but basically the games are the same regarding research. Then from research we go on to building. So if you colonize a planet, you can build different structures on these planets, and it works a bit the same in both games. However, in 3 you also have adjacency bonuses that makes building just that much more interesting, because you really have to utilize the space that you have correctly in order to get the maximum out of your adjacency bonuses, so that your planet is the maximum efficiency basically. The two games also work a bit differently regarding shipyards. So while in Galactic Civilizations 2 you had the shipyard basically be a separate queue from your planet, in Galactic Civilizations 3 your shipyard is actually a different entity in space. And this is already a nice improvement, I think. It just looks nice, and it's good to have it at hand. But it gets extra interesting because you can move the shipyard and you can get sponsorships from other planets, which basically means that planets put in their production into one single shipyard, so they all cooperate into making one shipyard better at making ships. One other thing Galciv 3 does differently is resources, which it adds on the galaxy map, and you can find and mine these resources, and well, they're pretty rare, so they add a nice source of competition. These resources allow you to build new stuff, like a special factory or a new module, like better armor and stuff, so they're pretty powerful in that sense. Furthermore, it also adds trade resources that you can basically find on your colonies. And you can either use these trade resources to get a small bonus of, for example, 5% to research or to morale or whatever, or you can actually use them as leverage in trading. You can basically offer those trade resources to other races in order to get something in return. Of course, you can't think about Galciv 2 without thinking about terror stars, and well, these were not implemented in Galciv 3. They were kind of weird because they were like a bit overpowered and underpowered at the same time, and they were in a bit of a weird position. They cost a lot of research and resources in order to make them, and normally once you got to them, well, it was pretty sure you were going to win anyway. So yeah, they added a bit of a weird dynamic, and they allow you to basically blow up a star, and it also kills all the planets that belong to that star in the process. So basically you could just wipe out a civilization like that. They're not in Galactic Civilization 3. They were a lot of fun, and I think the designers have planned something for them, but they probably won't return into the same thing. So if you were a big fan of Death Stars, or Terror Stars as they're called, then, well, you won't find them in Galactic Civilizations 3. Now that we're talking about death and destruction anyway, we might as well have a look at the battle viewer. So in Galactic Civilizations 2 and 3 you have the choice to view your battle. Well, it doesn't really affect the outcome, you can at least see in 3D what you were doing. And this was a very innovative feature of Galactic Civilizations 2, but in Galactic Civilizations 3 the devs really cut corners on this. Like, it's really hilariously bad in a sense. At least you can choose per battle whether you want to see it or not. Like in Galactic Civilizations 2 you had to activate or deactivate it in the options. But for example, here in this battle, like, this is supposed to be the cinematic view, and I don't even know what I'm shooting at. Like, I don't see my target. Nothing happens. The target already loses their hit point before you even shot. The devs just really cut a lot of corners on this, and that's a bit disappointing. Some changes I haven't covered yet are especially multiplayer. So for me, that's not really a big thing because, well, I don't really play multiplayer. But Galciv 3 offers multiplayer options while Galciv 2 doesn't. So if you're a multiplayer person, then definitely go for Galciv 3 because there's no other option. Furthermore, there are some other small changes. For example, in Galciv 3 you can have pirates that grow stronger over time and all that. But basically, yeah, I hope I gave you some good points of comparison so that you can make a choice for yourself which game you would like to buy. So which game would I recommend? Well, that depends on what you like. And if you're a graphics person, well, then go for Galciv 3. There's just no other question. If you are a new player, I think I would also recommend Galciv 3 because, well, basically the tutorials are a bit better, the UI works a bit more nicely, everything is a bit more slick in a sense. It's just easier to get into. However, if you're a person that really likes to spend thousands of hours into the same game, or hundreds of hours, then maybe go for Galciv 2, because at least at the moment, now that Galciv 3 doesn't have any expansions yet, there's just a bit more meat to the bone in Galciv 2. Like, the political system is very interesting, and The espionage is fun, and there's just a bit more things to do. Galciv 3 definitely has the better ship designer though, so if you're a very creative person, then Galciv 3 might be better. So all in all, well, I guess it's in a bit of a tie for me. I personally like Galciv 3 a little bit better than 2 because I really enjoy the ship designer more. But you can't go wrong with either game. They're both fun. Of course, Galciv 3 is a bit more expensive, so if that's a big problem, then just go for Galciv 2. So with that, I hope I gave you a good overview on what the differences and the similarities are between these games, and I hope you can make a choice for yourself which game you might like better. Because of course, Galciv 2 is a bit cheaper than 3 is, so that might be a factor as well. So yeah, I hope you found it useful, and see you next time.